Yeah.
Let's call the meeting to order. All of the city council members are present. Before we move on, George, would you like to introduce our guest from Vance Air Force
I
Base?
would. With us today is Tank Smith. He's the Deputy Support Group Commander out at the base. They have a Lieutenant General in town that's going to be a guest speaker tomorrow. So what they did was draw straws to see who got the privilege of coming to our meeting, and he won. And all the rest had to go with the general. So anyway, Tank, welcome aboard. He's been here a long time Enid resident, and first time he's had a chance to join us. So welcome.
Thanks.
Hey, welcome aboard, Tank. Shouldn't you have been in the Army with a name like Tank?
You know, he's never heard that joke.
That's the best I can do. Unless you want to hear the one about the ballistic missile warning, but we won't.
No.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you. Item 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda of January the 18th, 2018. Anybody?
Mayor, I did talk to Gerald this afternoon about some items on the park fee schedule. I had a question. One of them is the Dillingham Garden Shelter, the little shelter there out the west end of the garden there in Dillingham Gardens. The fee schedule listed that at $75 a day. You can't get 4 people in that little shelter. I mean, it's a little, it's just a little thing. There's just a little decorative thing, and they've got it the fee on it the same as the Performing Arts Pavilion. And I think we need to make an adjustment in that. I suggested to Gerald that the only thing that I know they do is they have weddings.
Every wedding.
And I think $50 would be plenty.
I'd be glad to make it $50.
Unless somebody else thinks there's a big reason why we should charge $75 for that little thing. And then I also, the little gym that we have there at the old Wilson School location, Champion Park, I really think that $50 an hour to rent that building is pretty steep. If somebody's going to have a birthday party for their child or something, it's going to last 2 hours, you got to trade. Pay $100 to rent that building?
That's what it,
I think it's too much.
what it costs at Simpsons if you rent the saloon.
How much is it used at that rate?
At that rate, we don't know. We've never charged that much.
Well, it's not. Kevin's not actually ever may be able to speak to that, but let me jump in there because we've had some of these discussions. We are specifically. You'll remember the last study session we talked about our efforts to. What Parks and Rec is doing to have more recreational events. Specifically, most of those are focused on Champion Gym right now. We came up with $50 because we think it's reasonable.
An hour.
Because in all of those events, you'll remember Kevin talked about we're going to have a paid staff person in there because we want to have a staff person there, just like the event center does, to make sure that the bathrooms stay clean and to make sure that the rules get followed and all that stuff. So it can kind of get expensive. Actually, I thought maybe you were going to say that might be a little bit lower than it should be. So I'm thinking 50 is good, but I'm interested in what the commissioners think, besides what you think, Commissioner.
Well, that's all right.
Too,
To me, I think the renters will come more near taking care of it if they have to pay a little more than.
And also renting birthday space,
Do what?
birthday party space at Leonardo's or
It's all expensive.
other option. I mean, it's not ever for a couple hours. $100 isn't crazy. As much space. I mean, it's a big space too. It's not like just a small little party room. I mean, it's a full gymnasium.
Particularly when you think about, spills, you're having a party in there, cake and stuff like that, you get on that floor. Cleaning that floor is a 3-hour job if you get in there with, trying to sweep and then mop, and that's a massive area to be able to take care of. So, I mean, I personally think $50 is pretty reasonable per hour if you're going to be having parties and that type of stuff in there.
I just really don't think we ought to be trying to make money off of people on these.
Trust me, we won't be making. We're not good at
Trying to
making
break
money,
even.
Commissioner.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then I can give that up. I think it's too much, but so what? The splash pads too, according to the schedule.
Mr. Wilson, you do a lot of events, and I think you may have done some events in that building or
Not yet.
wanted to, but what do you think about the fee from your experience?
I think it's probably fine. I think for something like a family reunion or a birthday party or something like that, I think it's reasonable. What I would suggest is if somebody wanted to use it for an extended period of time, maybe talk about a different kind of fee schedule if they wanted it to do like a whole night event or like a whole day thing. Maybe talk about what that might cost and maybe not do an hourly rate. If say an hourly rate up to two and a half hours or something like that. And then if you wanted to have like a longer event, then when it's going to get super expensive, maybe do that on a case-by-case basis or something like that.
Okay. This ordinance gives me the ability to do that.
Yep.
Because
I mean, I think hourly
I can set
rates are
some of the
great
rates that aren't
for
specified.
small things. But then if you get into somebody wanting to use it like for an entire day, then I think that would be cumbersome at some point. But I think you definitely want to recoup your cost. I mean, for the staff and the cleaning and all those kind of things.
And besides that, if they do it all day, you only have to clean the floors once.
Right.
You don't have to clean
Right.
it 3 times.
Right.
Yeah.
So either way, you're going to have the same amount of cleaning involved, whether it's an hour or 6 hours.
Yeah, fixed
So I think you could look at it and maybe if it's a short amount of time, stick with that hourly rate, and if it's a longer amount of time, figure out a different.
We can always try it, and if people
Go
aren't
here and
using
see
it.
what happens.
Yeah.
we'll see how many events we end up having that want it for, say, more than 2 or 3 hours at a time, and we'll adjust
Yeah.
accordingly.
I think that's fair.
The other thing we talked about was the splash pads. I don't know whether you come up with any information about that.
Yes, originally, very good point. When we, as you know, in our effort to get the information out as soon as possible, we typically always send the agenda out on Fridays now before the meeting. Even though the law only requires 24 hours notice, we're trying to give you guys notice and the public notice because we want to encourage transparency and discussion, all that stuff. So the version that we sent out had this same, pretty much a similar fee schedule. At the bottom, it had fees for the splash pad. Kevin was out today sick. You may have gotten some more information, but I did hear his message to me because when we put this ordinance together, I think that got added in from something. Maybe Carol has some insight, but we recognized when we reviewed this on Tuesday as staff that that probably wasn't right. So we took that off and reposted that as this. So to answer the question, no. Kevin tells me that we don't rent out the splash pad. We don't exclusively allow the splash pad to be used by people at this time. It doesn't mean we can't charge a fee or set up something. People do have parties there, but when they do, it's a public entity, so they can't exclude other people from participating.
So you just took that item off of it.
We took that item off of there. It doesn't mean that, quite frankly, the fee schedule with the ordinance, the city manager gets to set unless there's something on there that's specified in the ordinance. So if we deem that we want to do that in the future, we probably would add it. And I'm presuming we try to figure out what a fair, reasonable fee for that was, because we do rent the pool. And typically that $150 rental is typically, pool party lasts about a couple of hours typically. So the splash pad would probably be less per hour than the pool, probably. But right now, like I said, we haven't had exclusive use or allowed exclusive use. Might luck out that somebody could use it if nobody else is there, but on a hot day, probably not likely.
Yeah.
Does that answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Item 3, present and discuss the fiscal year 2016-2017 audit. Aaron?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. We have finished up the audit, and again this year, for the 5th year, we are using RSM. We have with us tonight Mike Gibson, our audit partner, and Jake Weekler, who is the audit assurance manager on our engagement. Going to take a few minutes and kind of go through the management side of it, the management discussion analysis at a high level, and then I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can update you on anything regarding the audit and address any questions that you may have for them. So on pages 1 and 2 of the audit that you received, this is the opinion that was issued by RSM The opinion was issued on December 22nd, which was within the time frame of when we have to have that issued by December 31st of each year. They issue an opinion on several units within our government. They issue a government-wide for governmental type opinion and a business type opinion, and then on each major fund of the city, and then aggregated non-major funds. The major funds of the city are general fund, police fund, fire, water capital, and capital improvement on the governmental side. And on the business type side, it is the Woodring Airport, the Enid Event Center, and the airport. Everything else is a non-major fund, and they roll up and aggregate into those opinion units. On each of our units, we did receive an unmodified opinion. That is the highest level of assurance that any auditor can give on financial statements. And so they fairly represent in all material aspects on each of those units. So we go through and look at the statement of activities on a government-wide level. This is everything rolled into one set of financials for all of the city's funds and authorities. You can see we had a total decrease in revenues of about $5.9 million, and expenses declined by about $8.2 million. As we went through the budget process for 16-17, there was a concerted effort to pull back in many areas across the city so that we could prepare ourselves for the future of Call Lake funding. We needed to leave some more of the funds that EMA was generating in that fund to shore up some cash positions so that we are in a position to fund future phases of the Call Lake engineering and construction as that comes along. And so this is a reflection of those budgets that were adopted, and this graph represents that plan realized. Some of the changes that went into those revenues and expenses decreasing. The charges for service were mainly all municipal authority. There's some decreases in water of about $544,000. Some decreases in solid waste and landfill, $646,000, and then sewer and stormwater made up another $500,000 of that. A lot of that was due to directly to coke, nitrogen, decreased usage as they've gone on to gray water, and also some decreased landfill charges there related to their remodel that were a one-time non-recurring expense. Grant contribution line did go up. That was a result of finishing out that airport runway extension project during the year. And then the other revenues that decreased in that $4.1 million number there have to do with property tax for the TIF related to advanced foods. Enid Event Center revenues decreased along with their expenses in there. There was an increase in taxes from Call Lake, but then there was also a decrease in transfers, which when they net out of here, it goes against the revenue there for contributed capital from governmental to business type funds. So if we do a project for stormwater, it's in a governmental fund, stormwater, but whenever it gets booked to the asset, it's on the business type EMA side, it's the EMA's asset. And so that causes some of that decrease there in revenues. It's just a bookkeeping as it flows through there. The expenses, there were increases in 5 areas. Public safety, main increases there were all in personnel, and some compensated absences liabilities increasing of about $736,000. Utility increases were about $741,000, and that had to do with the loan issuance costs of the 2016 OWRB note on phase 2 for the Call Lake funding, and then some increased depreciation expense and landfill closure expense as we get closer to closing out that landfill sale. That expense went up, and this year almost $500,000. Airport also increased by $500,000 due to depreciation, then cost of goods sold. They had some higher revenues as well to offset that. And then golf and transit. Golf was the transition to taking over running the snack bar and the pro shop, and so those startup costs there. And the transit we just had some major vehicle repairs and some work comp increases within that specific fund. So that's what drove those funds up. The decreases in all other categories, again, we had a one-time academy incentive of 2.8 million that was not repeated, so that was a decrease in expenditures during the year. There were decreases of 925,000 in the event center fund that offset against those revenue decreases depending on what risk of events they're taking on. And then we had decrease in public works of 3.8 million, which is capital outlay in funds like the capital improvement fund, street and alley, sanitary sewer, all of those type funds. As we pulled back in funding projects at the same level we had, that resulted in a decrease in these expenditures during the year. As we move over to the statement of net position, this is a graphical representation of what that looks like. You can see overall we did have an increase in assets, liabilities, and net position, with decreases in deferred inflows and outflows that are mainly related to pension. And we'll go into each of these areas and kind of what makes up those numbers. This is what it looks like numerically, that same information. You can see in current assets we have an increase of $22.6 million. The majority of that is cash and investments and restricted cash and investments that made up about 23 million. Then we had a slight decrease in receivables. Capital assets will be discussed further on the next slide, but it's only $385,000 decrease in that category during the year. Deferred outflows decreased by 2 million. Total liabilities went up 10.36, and that's due to the Call Lake issuance of the $14 million note and some new lease payments that we took on, and then payments offsetting that during the year. Deferred inflow also decreased on the pension, and all of that resulted in a net position improvement of $12.3 million to the city's bottom line during the year. So we talked about specific current assets. We had $10.8 million in unrestricted cash and investments that increased. About $500,000 of that was due to the donation to the airport for the terminal building. And $4 million of it came in as we reimbursed some projects that we paid out of our operating fund at the end of the year, from restricted accounts to unrestricted, to reimburse ourselves for expenses we had paid out of unrestricted. In the restricted cash and investments, we had a large increase of over 12 million there as well, and those are due to increases in OWRB proceeds. At the end of the year, we had $12 million in those accounts. We had $2 million in sales tax related to Call Lake, and we had a decrease in GEO bond proceeds that we finished spending out related to the bridges that we finished out over on Roop. And then we had a decrease in advanced foods property tax come in to pay out on that bond. And we're just a pass-through entity on that, so what we receive from the county is what we pay over to pay down that bond. So we had some the other $700,000 decrease was just due to timing on receivables, prepaid assets, inventories at the end of the year. Net capital assets, this is the breakdown of what this looks like when we look at it by category type. We have total net decrease of $385. We have land of $150, and that was the purchase of the Family Dollar building right across the street over here. We had CIP, the net wash in and out of that fund for the year was a decrease of $9.8 million. And so as we do projects for engineering largely, they come into CIP and they may stay there for a year or 2 years while it's under construction, and then it goes off of CIP. So it would be a reduction to CIP and get booked somewhere else. So on this one, construction in progress, large decrease is going to be the airport runway. It was a $9.5 million project total, and it came off of construction in progress and went on to infrastructure during the year. Another one that went off of construction in progress this year was the fire station number 4 redo, and so we have building and infrastructure there that increased as a result of that. Excuse me. We also had water well improvement projects, water line replacement, a landfill cell, sewer improvement, sidewalks, mowers, entryway, crack seal machine, striping machine. There are a lot of equipment and vehicles that ran through this. Depreciation of 14.7 was very comparable. It was less than $100,000 different than it was last year. Long-term debt increases here again, the OWRB note, it was 14.385 million with the premium on that issuance. There was also new leases added. There were 3 new trash trucks added for the solid waste department. There were also 2 leases for the Meadow Lake Golf Course, one for a utility truck and one for a greens mower out there. And so those were increases. Also, the post-closure liability did go up $494,000. The decreases are all the payments on all of the leases and notes outstanding. And we also did see a decrease in net pension liability this year, which is a big change from previous years. So we move on to net pension liability. There's 3 pension plans that affect the city of Enid's financial statements. There's the City of Enid pension plan, there's a Oklahoma firefighters pension and retirement, and the Oklahoma police pension and retirement. The City of Enid's pension plan actually saw a change this year, decreasing the liability in our book by $5.1 million. The majority of that, $3.3 million, was due to investment returns on the assets that were in that pension plan. The balance of that came as a result of some changes that we made earlier in the year for the pension plan, increasing the vesting period from a 5 to 10 year period, and increasing the time period that we average the pension based on for the benefit from 3 years to 5 years. The police and fire pension, you can see the change was a decrease of about 2.4 million almost in both categories. So we have a larger liability on our books. The police and fire pension are funded through contributions from the employees, the employers, the municipalities, as well as the state. And overall, their pension liabilities are allocated through all the municipalities that are participating in those plans. And so you can see what percentage of the plan we're having to recognize that liability based on. The reason why you see such a difference here in their investment returns versus our investment returns is the police and fire pension are reported 1 year in arrears compared to the city's plan. So the numbers that you're looking at for the city's plan are 6/30 of 17, whereas police and fire are 6/30 of 16. By the time that they get their pension plan audited and get the information available for municipalities, it's common that it gets reported so that we can issue our report on time 1 year in arrears. And so their returns were not nearly as high as the cities were. I would anticipate and hope that their investment returns would look a little better come this next year based on our investment returns this last year.
Are those funded through the state legislature?
Yes, I believe that's the case. It's a state pension plan.
What's the question?
The police and fire pension, are they funded through the state legislature?
No. Well, they do get some funding from the state legislature, but they're also funded by you all making employer contributions and by the members themselves, the police and firemen themselves. So there are mainly 3 sources of contributions being made, and part of it is state legislature appropriation of insurance premiums, percentage of the insurance premiums collected get funded to the pension systems, and then the others are employer contributions and actual member contributions.
Thank you.
Did we figure out why the police pension net position changed so much from 16 to 17? The $67,000 to the 2.4 million. It was the decrease in the plan fiduciary net position as a percentage of total pension liability dropped quite a bit from 16 to 17. Do we know why?
Right, their net investment income for 15 was $74 million, whereas in 16 it was negative 21 million. So
it was a
$90 million.
Well, I didn't see that big a
change.
shift with the fire in the same fiscal year.
Right, and the fires,
I mean, they were already in the hole, but
theirs went from 116 million return on investment to 14 million. So it was
Okay.
about the same change. It's just a much larger plan.
Okay.
They have over $1 billion in their plan for fire, but police is smaller than that.
Okay.
So it has a bigger impact, even though it's the same amount of money.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the net wash of those is, it was great that the city's plan performed so well so that it could offset some of the police and fire, most of the police and fire, so that we didn't have a large hit, again, to our financial statements from the police and fire pension, which are largely out of our control. We contribute 100% of what we need to as an employer and as members. I just wanted to point out, just as a highlight, overall, while we did increase net position $12.3 million for the year, the net position in the fund balance for the Enid Municipal Authority was all of that. When we look at everything else cumulatively together, they had a net decrease as we pulled back in those areas. And so Enid Municipal Authority did make quite an improvement on their net position. They went from 14, we improved 14 million last year, and we improved another 16 million this year in EMA. Their net position starting in 14 was 70 million, and EMA in 17 was 103 million. So we've made quite a significant improvement as we're preparing for that colleague program, specifically in the municipal authority. There are a couple new statements just to be aware of that affected, one this year and one that you'll see next year that hit. GASB 77 was a tax abatement disclosure that is in there this year. I believe it's on page 50. Any taxes that are coming into the municipality that we rebate or refund back or have foregone any taxing, we have to disclose that. There were 3 agreements. It was a total of $138,000 that we rebated back this year. And then GASB 75 is other post-employment benefits. This is one that currently the portion that we have to recognize is only a $66,000 liability on our statements. Beginning next year, we have to recognize the actuary accrued liability in the full amount. When that was calculated out for the last report that we had done by our actuary, that was $2.2 million. And so we anticipate it will be at least that much next year when we budgeted. This is basically, we have retirees who are on our health plan, so they're paying the same rate that all of our other employees pay. They're paying the full premium, both the employer and employee side, but there's an implicit rate subsidy that comes as a result of that. And so that creates a liability in the accounting world that we have to book for that.
I mean, is there any mechanism to, I mean, how does our actuary, do we know how our actuary calculates that amount? Because, I mean, this idea that we're giving do we get 2 quotes for health insurance plans? I mean, for the pool of current employees and then for the pool of current employees plus retired employees, and then compare premiums? I mean, how do they come up with that number?
Right. There are actuarial tables out there that they use that determine all of that, that are standard that they have to use.
Yeah, but then does it change when we change health insurance plans? I mean, is it a function of how much of the premium cost? Or, I mean, that number just, this is the one that just bothers me. And I don't.
Right.
Is there a way to, can we do anything about it?
From an accounting perspective, no, and from an actuarial perspective, I would say we could sit down and go through the actuarial valuation with you. Hopefully not tonight, because I don't have it with me, but no, I'd be glad to do that.
I don't want to know it. I just want to know. I mean, I just want to know if there's anything we can do about it. I mean, I hate that we are assuming a $2.2 million liability on our books that is for money we don't pay. Because the retired employees pay the full premium, and it's based on the idea that they get a discount because they're part of our group, but I don't see that documented anywhere, and I
No way to verify it.
there's no way to verify it. It's crap. I hate it. So can we go, I mean, is there anything we can do? Do we just eat it, or?
Essentially,
Okay.
yes. That's the short answer. From an accounting recognition, because the underlying theory is that when that employee is working for the city, the city is offering them a benefit that they will get paid or that they will realize after they retire, which means that they will get to continue on the city's health insurance plan at a much, much lower rate than what they would otherwise if they had to go out into the open marketplace and buy their own insurance, okay? And the GASB, the Accounting Standards Board, has always said that you recognize that the city recognizes the cost of that while they are employees. I mean, you're incurring that cost while they're employees. So really, that liability is what is accumulated over time of as they are making that payment, it's a runoff liability, but as they are making that payment, it's built up over time. Really, the liability, it's not related to the employees that have retired. It's related to the employees that haven't retired yet, that are going to have to pay the health and the city's going that the city will be paying that or the city won't be
But we
paying the
won't be
insurance.
paying it.
But
That's
they
the
will
part
be
that offends us.
but
We
they
don't
will
pay
be
the premium.
they will be benefiting from that by paying lower premiums. So I guess I would say it like this: it's a liability is if the insurance premiums that you're paying now are $100 a month, and if you excluded the retirees from participating in the plan at all, and so then the insurance would only be $80 a month. It's
Yeah,
that
but we
it's
don't
that
know
gap
that.
spread out. Do what?
But we don't know what
the actuary.
actual gap is.
But like Aaron said, the actuary does
It's a
have
black
tables.
box, though. I mean, it's the black box nature of it that
Yeah.
numbers go in and numbers come out, and we assume a $2.2 million liability. And I don't buy the difference, but I clearly can't do anything about it either. So
I think it would be.
That's okay.
But
we need to quibble with the actuarial, not you.
Well, that would be helpful because because I will tell you that we get the actuarial valuation from management, who your actuary does it. We have actuarial specialists in our firm that we send it off to them, and they tell us whether the actuary followed actuarial standards or not. I can tell you that you're following accounting standards, but I don't know. I'm not an actuary, so I can't tell you. I rely upon the actuary and our actuary specialists to tell you that $2.2 million is computed in accordance with the actuarial standards.
Aaron, at some point in the next year, before we do this again, and before we have to assume this liability for next fiscal year, can someone just send me an email with the actuarial's explanation of where the $2.2 million number came from? We don't need to do it in a study session. Just send me an email with their explanation and why.
And what they'll tell us, Commissioner Ezell, is their explanation is their report, but we will attempt to do that.
Well, but I mean,
And we
but
will-
city to city has wildly different health insurance policies, and this is ultimately based on what our health insurance policy is. And so I just,
Andy
I'm
will be able
offended
to
by
help
this
us,
one.
I'm sure, with some language that takes it from
Okay.
actuarial stuff to try to make it
will
understandable.
explain it to me.
So that you don't, and the report, I don't remember how thick the report is now. But
It's not that big. It's not that big. And the city's actuary does a good job whenever we talk. I believe I'll tell you what, Commissioner Ezell, you can sit in on one of the calls when the
that's
actuaries
fine.
and
Really.
all of us get together.
Like I said, I want one email with one explanation
Okay.
of that number.
But,
I want to know
okay.
where that number came from. It's a big number.
Yeah.
It's a big change from
I
year to
assure
year.
you too, we will be looking into this. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but over time, we're not gonna be the only ones hit with this. Every city, if they do it right, is going to be hit with this. So we'll all be looking into.
Right.
Are there things we can do? And there'll be folks out there. I've already seen at least one flyer about, do you have Gatsby 75 woes? I'm sure they have all the answers for a small fee or something. But
Yeah.
we'll look into some
12
of that
months,
stuff and
give me the
see.
email.
Yeah, 12 months,
You
right.
got 12 months, send me an email with an
Buyer
explanation.
beware. Pay me and then you get to.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more question, you're going to be on that telecon.
Anyway, Aaron, you left, so I don't think you were done though.
You're good. That was my last slide, so.
Oh, okay.
Not it.
Okay. Well, after Erin's presentation, she didn't leave a whole lot for me to talk about, but so that there are some things I want to talk about, and mainly just the audit process and the results of the audit. Because Erin did a fantastic job of going through the financial statements of the city. As she mentioned right at the very beginning, we had an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and our audit is performed in accordance with auditing standards issued by the American Institute of CPAs, so auditing standards that are generally accepted in the United States, and also auditing standards issued by the Comptroller, government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General's office. And so the combination of those two standards require three things: the issuance of an opinion on the financial statements, which we did, had an unmodified opinion, an assessment and tests of the city's internal controls over financial reporting. The objective, we don't issue an opinion on whether or not the city is, the city's effectiveness of financial internal controls or financial reporting. We do assess and perform tests, and then if there are material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal controls, we are required to report those to you because we don't issue an opinion. Material weaknesses may exist that we did not identify. Having said that, I will say that the results of our audit indicated that there are not any material weaknesses in the city's internal controls over financial reporting. We did identify one matter that we reported as a significant deficiency, which mainly means that it's a matter that in the design and the operating effectiveness of the internal controls that we felt was important enough to report to you. It has to do with the way the city was accounting for, not operationally, but just accounting for some of the pension liabilities and the pension accounts with the GASB 68, and the city has implemented a corrective action plan to correct that, so we don't expect that to happen again next year. We also, in connection with the audit under government auditing standards, perform tests of compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. And if there is an issue of non-compliance that is material to the financial statements, we're required to report that to you as well. There was one such matter this year at the end of the year for a period of about 3 or 4 business days, 6 days included, and 6 days counting a weekend. The city's deposits were under collateralized. The bank in which the deposits were held were they were in excess of FDIC insurance, and the bank had not pledged collateral to cover that. Once they figured out what had happened, they immediately pledged the collateral. There's a state statute. It's 110%, right, of, that investment that if it's in excess of FDIC insurance, the investments greater than equal to 110% of the deposits need to be collateralized. And city management and the financial institution have, after that occurred, have worked out a procedure to help ensure that does not happen again. And so that corrective action was already in place, and we will obviously during our audit for FY 2018 we will test that.
Do you have peaks and valleys in the revenue flow?
Well, this was actually due to some of that. This was actually the city in the process of closing out its books, trying to make some transfers and get some things taken care of. Just to close out and part of the year-end close at June 30. So some transactions that might not occur during the random middle of the month or something, but maybe only at year-end. That's what helped cause that, was because of doing that at year-end. So
This was actually the issue that was self-identified that they briefed you on when you entered.
Yes. And that's, thank you for pointing that out, because we did not come in our audit and identify this. When we were getting ready to start our audit, Aaron told us about this, and knowing full well that we would have to report it as a finding. So anyway.
Okay, thank you.
The other factor or facet of our audit is the single audit over the city's federal programs. The city had about $1.4 million, I believe, in federal expenditures this year, and we were required to audit programs that was sufficient to get at least 40% of the total, or roughly around $700,000. And so there were 2 programs that we were required to test to get there. It was the Airport Improvement Grant and the Community Development Block Grant. And our testing includes, again, tests of internal controls over the compliance with those programs, and the effectiveness, and then also actually testing the compliance. We do not issue an opinion on the internal controls, but we do issue an opinion as to whether or not the city complied with the requirements of those programs, which include allowable costs and various other things, but allowable costs being probably the most important. Probably period of performance is in there, making sure that you're spending the money in the right period and everything. And we did have an unmodified opinion. We did not have any findings in the federal programs, either in internal controls or compliance, and we had an unmodified opinion on that, meaning that in our opinion the city complied with the requirements of its federal programs. So those are the high-level results of the audit. Other things, we did, as we're going through the audit process, There were a couple of audit adjustments, primarily related to pensions, that were posted by this, that we proposed that the city corrected. We did not have any disagreements with management regarding the scope of the audit. They did not restrict our access to anybody that we wanted to talk to or anything like that. Nothing like that. We didn't have any difficulties there. Erin and her team were very prepared for us when we arrived, and very cooperative throughout the entire process. So anyway, we were very pleased with the way the audit went this year, and the way the results ended up. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that any of you have. So, yes, sir.
Do other municipalities that you audit have the same difficulties with their pension accounting?
It's pretty new still, and it's getting layered. I mean, of all the ones that we did, I'd say we might have had all the ones that we do. And I'm going to throw school districts in there too, because they have the same stuff. We may have had a couple that came through scot-free, but most of them had something in there. So it's, because what happens is there's lots of factors that go into the accounting, and they stay on there for several years. So now you've got 3 years and things going, 1 year they're an increase and the next year it's a decrease, and you have to kind of net it. It'll get easier for the city, and I think Erin, we all talked about things, and Erin's going to implement some procedures. I think we'll reduce that and probably eliminate it going forward. But it's certainly not an easy process. So
True.
yeah.
I think you have one question.
Yes, sir.
What's the determining factor on the amount of money that a city would receive, like you said, for the airports and CDBG? Is it by population or is it by request of the city?
It's really, go ahead.
I was going to say, generally in terms of the...
Hey, Jake, would you go up to the mic?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
All
Jake,
right.
they want to hear
Sorry.
you.
Are you talking about what would actually trigger the audit, or...
No, I think the
Or
amount of money that you
revenue
get.
coming in from the federal government directly into the city. Do you all have any idea?
Well, sometimes, I mean, and it's going to vary grant by grant. So for the airport grant, that's probably going to be, you apply for a grant, and it's probably going to be how much do you need for the project you're applying for? For so maybe some grants that are eligibility based, or something that could be your community development block grant. That could be based on population and need and stuff like that. But it could also be based on just how much you apply for, and also you get money from the Department of Transportation and for public transit, and a lot of that's kind of consistent with usage and stuff, and also there's budgets and everything. So, go ahead.
Much of what you get is mostly passed through from the state. So, ultimately it's going to be kind of what you apply for and what you would be eligible to receive. It's very subjective. So I thought he was asking what would actually trigger us to audit a program.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Item 4, present and discuss under her wing was the Universe Downtown Art Project status.
Yes, Romy Owens is here, so our artist, as you know, and she's going to give you guys an update. There have been a few changes and some delays, but she'll explain it, and I think everything's in good shape. Romy?
Hi, thank you all for having me to give an update. I'm thrilled to be here and tell you where we are with the project right now. Well, this is a little video that's supposed to play, but I don't know how to... there we go. So this is where we left in August. This is where we were at the end of August with the idea of a panel that was made out of a perforated metal mesh that had a lift. Upon very careful consideration about this material, I decided that I wasn't satisfied with the aesthetic or the safety or the potential noise that was involved in using this material to cover the project. And so when Michael and I'm trying to, sorry. Now, how do I move to the next slide? Like that? Nope. Sorry, I don't know how
It's
to
the
use
arrows
it.
on the bottom.
Down at the bottom?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
hey,
there's
Sarah,
some-
that is the next slide. So after Michael, Shuck, and I started talking about alternate materials to cover the surface, so the frame stays the same. This frame that you're seeing with the multiple towers that come down into these triangular shapes and the shape of the overall form stays the same. But in trying to figure out what that surface looks like so that it would be aesthetically pleasing, that it would be safe for public participation, and that it would provide shade and really lend itself to the concept. Of course, I think at the last session I had talked about cane mail being a product that we had really investigated closely. Cane mail was very nice to work with and to talk to about the possibility of using that as a material. When they came back with their price, it was just cost prohibitive. Even in a best case scenario, it was cost prohibitive. And so we started exploring other options that kind of lent themselves to my own personal aesthetic in art, and we explored this string art. And I wanted to provide this just as an example so you can see the progress and how we've landed on what we ultimately have landed on. So this is a rendering of the idea of using paracord as a material that would create really nice line and really nice shade. Am I controlling the slide or are you? Yeah. So, and I wanted to provide examples of how string art or rope art is used so you wouldn't think that I was insane in trying to think of this. This is an artist, Gabriel Daw, who does very large scale string installations. He's using actually a very thin sewing string, but you can see how there's a grace of movement and there's a quality of line that's really nice, and it provides translucence, but also provides enough of an object that you can tell that it could provide some shade in the daytime. Next slide, please. And then Janet Eshelman is another who uses rope. She uses a fishing net carbon wire. This is over Boston. So the capacity of using rope in this way is not unheard of, especially when it comes to public art. It allows for really nice movement and really lovely flow to it. It's really graceful material. Ultimately, the reason why we are not using paracord was because of the meeting with the structural engineer, in which he talked to me very specifically about how this was a viable material and a feasible material. And he understood the aesthetic that it would achieve and was really pleased with it. After one ice storm, it would be irreparable. It would be damaged to the point where it would have to be restrung. And obviously that is not ideal in trying to create something that has at least even a 10-year, if not longer, permanence. And so when Michael and I regrouped after that structural engineer meeting, we decided that this couldn't be the material, which leads us to where we are now. This is the elevation, so you can get a sense of what it could look like covered. And these are elevations that have been published, and it won't be yellow again. But you get a sense of having something that is a screen and would be form-fitting to the object. Next slide, please. And where we've landed is on Cascade Coil. So Cascade Coil is actually a brand name of a product. It's used in architectural building and design, interior and exterior often. What you would know it most commonly as is fireplace screens. So it's got a really lovely coil. We all are familiar, well, most people are familiar with how a fireplace screen drapes across a fireplace. In a large scale application like you see here or in the next slide, these are all how Cascade Coil can be used, and it provides a really nice drape. It provides a nice shade. It's very graceful. It can move with the wind without being overly dangerous to anybody within the proximity. Last slide, please. And this shows an exterior application of how it can be used in very large sheets. And so where we are right now is researching where to purchase Cascade Coil, the quantity, potential colors. I'm working with some people on creating new renderings. I'm so sorry that they weren't done in time by last Friday when I needed to submit this PowerPoint presentation. But I do have renderings coming, which will be lovely to see, kind of to get an idea of what it will look like on the form. I think the Cascade coil will be beautiful. I think it's an ideal alternative to the cane mail that we had been pursuing in September and October. When I think about, I've spent a lot of time, as you can imagine, visualizing how it will look on it and how it will catch wind and how it will catch light, how it will look during the day and in the night. And I'm remarkably satisfied with what this will look like. I think it's going to be beautiful and elegant. Everything else about the project hasn't changed. The form, the lights, the prairie, the sidewalk being ADA compatible, all of these things are all features that have remained constant and will remain constant. We're just working on where to purchase the Cascade coil, the budget involved in that, and that's kind of where we are.
Is the steel finally?
Yeah, I actually just talked to the steel guy today, so that I could have firmer updates. As you know, there have been steel delays outside of the control of seemingly anybody. We had been told February. This morning when I texted my steel guy in Oklahoma City, he said, "Funny you're texting today. The steel is being delivered from Tulsa. Tulsa's where it was rolled into its shape."
So it's already been rolled?
It's been rolled,
okay.
And it's been delivered back to Oklahoma City. Unfortunately, when it was delivered, none of the pipes were labeled, which is something, that I'm just have to roll with. So it's going to take the people in Oklahoma City a minute to figure out which pipe goes in which tower. Every single one of the legs of the original, if you can go back to the yellow slide, every single one of these towers, there are 14 towers made up of 4 legs. Every single leg of every single tower is at a different bend and a different rotation. So for Oklahoma City people receiving this this pile of steel that's been rolled and not knowing exactly which 4 legs go together, it's going to take them a minute to figure that out. Once they have and they've figured out which 4 go together to make a tower, they have some welding and assembly that happens, and then they'll prime it and deliver it. He told me March. I said early March or late March. He said late March. I can only assure you that it is as frustrating for me to report that to you as it is for you to hear that. There's nothing more than I would like to say that we'll be breaking ground next week, or to come back and say, isn't it awesome that we're finished? I've learned a great deal working with steel. In the future, I don't know if it's a material I'll work with again, but
it is actually rolled this time.
it is rolled. It's delivered to Oklahoma City, so it's just the sorting and the welding that happens at this point.
Help me understand something. This metallic material that you're going to cover the frame with, is it going to be attached, I'm assuming, numerous locations on each of the frames?
Yes.
You mentioned the man was going to move it around. You think that, I would assume that a metallic material like that, if it was fastened down, it wouldn't be doing too much flapping in the breeze. This is kind of where my fiber art background comes in really handy. So imagine along the top of each of these towers, there'll be a horizontal line that will connect each set of towers along the top, and that's what it will be, the Cascade coil will be affixed to, that will drape. And then if you've ever, I know this is assuming a lot to ask, but if you've ever seen sewing patterns, there are ways in which to create extra movement and flow by creating triangular patterns that go in. So you'd have panel with a triangle here, and so at the top it'll be relatively static, but at the bottom is when it would have a little bit of movement and flow.
Like darts.
Darts. Thank
when
you,
you sew.
Tammy. Yes.
Right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, essentially it is. It's darts.
The coil you're talking about, you mentioned that the rope wouldn't be a good idea because ice storms would destroy it. How about this stuff?
No, this stuff will be, it's whether, it wouldn't do the same thing that rope does. Like rope has a certain amount of elasticity to give to have movement. And even if we pulled it taut, over time it would start to sag. Water would do that, but ice definitely would. And I mean, we've been really lucky, I guess, this year not to have an ice storm, although, you know, that can happen at any time. We all know that. But, you know, I think about the one a few years back that knocked out power for, yeah. Like it just takes one catastrophic ice storm to do irreparable damage. And so, no, this has the rigidity that it won't pull or change over time.
Structural engineer's happy with it?
Structural engineer is happy with it. The only thing that we are working on, because Cascade coil comes in a variety of
Coil sizes?
thank you. The coil size, the weight of the coil, the openness of the coil, all of these factors will go in. We have to meet some structural engineering standards, like it has to have a 70% open rate. And so finding the one that meets the weight and the openness requirements within our budget are our goal right now.
Great.
Yeah. What other questions can I answer for you?
What's your timeline beyond the end of March?
That is a great question. We hope to break ground, immediately. Steel in place, that will take some time just because there's holes to dig, there's concrete to pour, getting those towers in place. There will be some welding that's done on site after the steel towers are erected to have pinpoints to attach things like the lights and for that guideline along the top for the Cascade coil to hang from. It will then be painted. Then the Cascade coil will be put on place. Then sidewalk, bench, supplementary gravel, and then the prairie. Our insurance policy goes through June. So our goal is to not have to extend that insurance policy anymore because that is eating my lunch, like having to renew an insurance policy over and over. So the goal is to be finished by June.
Get the steel done.
Right. Yeah, the steel is super frustrating. But, I am very much of the opinion that you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. Not that I want flies, but I know it doesn't do any good to yell at anybody about this, so
Sure.
I'm not.
Any other questions? Romy? Ben, do you have any?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, discuss commercial sidewalk ordinance.
Yeah, and I'll preface this quickly. Mayor, we've had recently discussion about commercial sidewalks in particular. For those commissioners who have been on the commission for a while now, you know that we've had lots of discussions and lots of variations. For the new ones, I think maybe this will be the first revision that's coming of whatever it ends up being. We have some ideas. Chris Bauer's going to lead us through some stuff, and we're also going to, Angela, you're going to do some stuff up there too, and we're going to talk about the current ordinance, and we want to hear your feedback. We're going to bring some revision to you at some point in the future for you to consider. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Mayor, City Commissioners. Thank you, Carol. Happy to be before you this evening without a variance petition. It's the first time I've had an opportunity to talk to you about sidewalks. Last week, Gerald asked me to come to a meeting to discuss this, and I did two things. One, I reached for the comprehensive plan, which is here in front of you, and then the other simple task is I just asked my question, well, where are people walking? And in hopes to find that maybe if we can define that area where people are walking, then the ordinance can be shaped, and then we have fewer variances, because there is great support within the community as well as the commission to have sidewalks. We just need to get those where they need to be. Where people walk is pretty obvious. They walk in their neighborhoods. They walk on the trails. They walk to school. They walk to downtown. They walk to their local shopping area. And they walk to maybe a local job. And so I wanted to see if that finding squared with what we did in our comprehensive plan, and this is only a couple of years old. Walkability is a common theme throughout the comprehensive plan, so much so that it is in all of the 6 big ideas except industrial growth. So that's settled for a minute. So when you look at where people walk is in their neighborhoods, that's right here in your model neighborhoods. People are doing that for mainly to be healthy. They're also doing that to be social with their neighbors. We see that they really enjoy our trails, and so that's in this big idea here in your green network. So back just for a minute to model neighborhoods, your current sidewalk ordinance, you have, I think, that pretty close. We haven't heard a lot of variances on that, and it's because people want that. And your comp plan says you should be doing it, so I want you tick that box off. You're doing good there. You're doing it also here in the green network and the trail system, so you can tick that one off. If we go over here to downtown, as soon as our new hotel is complete, you're going to see the balance of the sidewalk on Independence, Main, and Grand will be complete, and then basically your downtown will be complete other than any maintenance that needs to occur. So there's another checkbox for you. We have the East Side Creative Hub, and that basically is the Broadway connection between the university centers and downtown, and you're almost through with that. So you're doing really good. You're doing what your comprehensive plan says. Here's one item yet to talk about, the West Garrett retail. And as you know, we hear variances, we see projects, sidewalks are being built there, but you're also seeing that. So the next slide is a view of your city, and this is the land use map. And just very quickly, here's the downtown. This is the East Side Enid Creative Hub. This is our Broadway Trail. And then, of course, the green lines here follow our drainage system and our trail system. Here is an indication that we need to define the West Garrett retail. It's important to realize that this is a plan. This isn't actual. There are no dimensions to these big red circles or little ones or the destination for retail or downtown. But if you like this concept, and what I think is important about the plan is not necessarily the 6 big ideas because you're doing them, but when you apply those to the map, the comp plan begins to give you areas to where you might want to start having sidewalks. Does that make sense? So to go a little bit deeper, we did not talk about the big circles and the little circles. And in the comp plan, the little circles are neighborhood centers. This is where, and the most recent one that's under construction right now is right here at Cleveland and Chestnut, Stonebridge. And we're reworking that intersection, and a part of that, we will have sidewalks there. But this has become a real magnet. The new Walmart that is in here, we're actually seeing pedestrian foot traffic on Chestnut, and I believe, I don't know for a fact, but I believe you're probably seeing people from this neighborhood, A, walking for food, groceries, and or employment. So when we do things like we did here at Stonebridge, it does then create activity. And so that's something to consider. The big ones are called community centers, and that's where you see bigger activity. Like out here, this would be the Walmart, Lowe's, etc., Atwoods area. So those are the areas that I think we can bring structure to the ordinance. And I have, if you're interested, an ordinance to show you, if you like this concept, what it might look. Would you like to see that? Mm-hmm. My next slide is here. The first place is the sidewalks need to be in the subdivision regulations. They're not there right now in your code, but this is where they need to be. And the reason they need to be there is that's where the balance of the infrastructure is: road, water, and sewer. So if you're thinking like a developer, you want to be able to go one place to find what do I need to do. Or if you're thinking about like an independent business person, I'm getting ready to build my C-store, where do I go to? What is the city's infrastructure needs? A lot of words on this slide, but I want you to take a moment and look at the ones that I have highlighted, because that's where the real rubber meets the road. So sidewalks in a new subdivision, this proposal, they will be provided. And there's good traction with you, the commission, for that. There's good traction within the community, our constituents that want that as well. Remember, this is where the number one place that people walk is right outside their door and visit with their neighbors. There is one exception, and we identified this in our current ordinance. If it's on an unimproved road, and that means a country road, a dirt road, the sidewalk would not be required. Does that make sense? Now, if I'm doing a subdivision off of a dirt road, I'm still going to do sidewalks inside my subdivision. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But I would not along that dirt road that borders my property. Any questions on that? I'll explain the rest of the words because they're similar to my other 3 slides, and then I'm done. B just says you got to do it in accordance with ADA. That's pretty obvious. We have construction standards set by our engineering department. That's what that's all about. We talk about how we're going to resolve if conflicts come up, most restrictive. And then I don't know whether the engineering wants as-built plans or not. We do require that on our roads, water, and sewer because we go back on those. So that's what would happen if somebody, if you did something like this in harmony with your comprehensive plan. This is what new subdivisions would be, and they would apply anywhere within your city limits. This is the one thing that doesn't fit in one of these areas. So before you ask me, the next question, well, what about existing, right? Because that's what we have more of than new. And in our current ordinance, there's all kinds of words in there, and if you've read that, I'm sorry, we'll try to get that better. It is painful to read. But again, the yellow, the black text is the same as the previous slide, so we need to waste any time. If you build in a new residence or a new commercial use, remember now subdivisions can be both residential and commercial. I don't have a lot of commercial, but that doesn't mean we won't, but they can be both. But if I'm in an existing subdivision and I build a new residence and there are sidewalks adjacent to the lot I'm building on, I build a sidewalk. If it isn't there, I don't build a sidewalk. I don't know how to make it any simpler than that. Does that make sense? Next one is what do we do with new commercial? And these are a lot that you see on variance requests. We just had a series of them this last time. Here's where I'm bringing in the comprehensive plan. If a new commercial or public, that would be us, the city of Enid, if we are developing in downtown, East Enid Hub, West Garrett retail, neighborhood centers, and community centers, we're going to build sidewalks. Does that make sense? Last slide. What about if you're in this area and you're an existing and you want to add? You've seen a lot of that. Mm-hmm. The A.E. Howard was the one right next to La Quinta. La Quinta was a multi-million-dollar development, so a sidewalk on their project budget was not as an impact as it was on A.E. Howard, who was basically fully developed, simply adding a smaller building in the back of their deal, and then they have to bear the same cost of a sidewalk that La Quinta did, so it's kind of a proportional thing. There's a lot in this slide, so I want to slow down here. But we know that most of these areas are already built or have something in them. So what I did here is existing commercial or public uses when the site plan review, we have a site plan review ordinance, is required. Not all commercial development is reviewed at this level. And there's 2 triggers. If, and I'll use A.E. Howard as an example because that's in your mind. Had their addition, and Carla, do you remember how big it was?
No.
Angela?
I wanted to say around 2,500.
That's what I thought. Thank you, ma'am. What the site plan review ordinance says, and this we've had this for a long time, you will do this unless your addition is under 5,000 square feet. So what we just learned from Angela, A.E. Howard was 2,500. They would not have been required to do a site plan. Does that make sense? So it would not have applied to them. So what I'm trying to dial in with this concept and this idea is when we have existing development, existing businesses that are trying to add something to enhance their business, it's not the same as a full-bore La Quinta hotel from scratch development. Does that make sense? The other trigger, I told you there were 2. One is if it's 5,000 square feet or less, no site plan review, no sidewalk. The other, or if the addition is less than 1/3, it's not required, okay? or if it exceeds 1/3. So in this example, I have an existing 6,000 square foot building. 1/3 of that is 2,000. A.E. Howard does 2,500. They have to do a site plan. They build the sidewalk. Do you see how that works? This has been embedded in your ordinances ever since I came to work for you many, many years ago. This is nothing new. We're just reaching into our existing ordinances and applying it to the sidewalk. That's the sidewalk ordinance, if you like it. And it doesn't have all the exceptions and all the definitions and all of those things. Can I answer any question?
Chris,
Yes, sir.
to me, it doesn't seem business friendly if somebody wants to build on to their existing commercial property and they don't have sidewalks and it's over 650 feet, you penalize the business by requiring them to have sidewalks.
Well, there is
When
no,
they probably haven't had a sidewalk there in 50 years.
there is no 650 square foot rule, Mayor. I don't know where that came from, but not in what I'm proposing. And I think what we need to look at is this existing right here.
Forget the 650.
Okay,
If they want to build a structure
right,
next to theirs to expand their business,
right.
and it doesn't have sidewalks in it, we require them to have sidewalks.
This proposal would, you may change that, Mayor.
But Bill, I have a basic fundamental disagreement, and you and I disagreed about this, and
That's fine.
about what the definition of business friendly is. And we have to look at what's good for the city as a whole, what is good for businesses, plural, as a whole,
I understand.
and everybody's got to pay in. And you and I may never agree about that. I think this is a decent compromise. I mean, I would prefer to see more requirements for building sidewalks, but this seems like a workable compromise. It certainly seems a lot simpler than what we have, and I like
We have to
simplicity.
change. Something has to change.
Well, I'm not sure something has to be changed, but if we are going to make a change, I like simplifying over
We
complicating.
probably override the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission 50% of the time
I think we adopted their recommendation more than we don't, Bill.
on variances. That's what I think. You
I'm
think
not
differently?
sure
not a
that's
problem.
right. That would be an interesting number to know.
Let me jump in here and say that this is not a finished proposal,
No.
but we are wanting to encourage feedback, because we are going to bring, because one of the, and we probably maybe should have started with what the current ordinance is, so probably for the sake of time, why don't you go on up, Angela? Sure. This, we want to take your feedback, this, and probably look at what our original intent was and balance with whatever our definition of business friendly is and come back with something. So this, I
We will vote
think,
that
does
in our
simplify it, but we will have the question of, again, where are we going to have sidewalks? So if we do it by this is where we'll
So
have them,
basically,
which is less than what we
this is
require now.
basically the same thing what we did with the residential one. Because the residential ordinance was anytime you did any kind of improvement and put up a shed or anything, it triggered the sidewalk ordinance. And we decided we weren't gonna do that. So, I mean, of a certain size. So this is basically doing the same thing. It's giving them a break. If it's not over a certain size, they don't have to do it.
But this goes even further because it talks about specific areas in which
Right.
we're putting the emphasis
I
on.
like
And I
that.
think that eliminates a lot of those
Random places.
well, random places and people having to put in variances. When I live in this, I've got this industrial area where nobody's walking type atmosphere. We're setting the tone in specific areas that we know we're going to have foot traffic, and we're targeting those.
Right.
I think that's the difference. Between
That's
what
the
we
huge
have.
And I think that we do want to be business friendly, but by the same token, I think our businesses should want to be city friendly to the citizens of our community and provide sidewalks. I mean, to me, we're all on the same team, but I think everybody should want it to be the best for everybody. I mean, I don't think it's a penalty by asking them to make our city walkable. I mean, I think it's their part that they do by having, it's the cost of doing business to me is if you're
If I could say
gonna play
something
along.
really.
Just a minute, please. I want to finish.
No, that's fine.
Thank you. I do want to say that my proposal is not citywide, and that is what your current ordinance is. It's very specific, and it hinges on the very things in your comp plan. The other thing I want to lift up is it is very simple, and I think that's probably a good spot to start, because you need to find bottom in this pond, and then you can always add complexity. That's what I want to share with you. So in addition to the ideas within the comp plan, If there's some place you want to add, you can just keep adding as long as you want. And I will give up the podium.
Boy.
Thank you, Chris, because we need to talk about what we have currently too, because this is a great proposal. And,
Well-
but he pointed out the big differences there too, so.
But
go ahead.
before we leave this, I want to mention one thing. I did have a business owner talk to me about, who gets to decide where the sidewalk is. This guy said, we've got a sidewalk area right in front of our business, but now you want me to put one out by the road.
Right. And right now, when we're permitting, when they bring in a commercial, industrial, or educational development, whether it's an addition or a new building, then they are required to do a sidewalk adjacent to the road. That's just what our current ordinance states. And engineering issues a right-of-way permit for placement of that sidewalk. And engineering goes out and does that inspection.
But even along Garriott, depending on where the ditch happens to be, it moves farther away from the road.
It does. If the bar ditch there is a deterrent to the construction of a sidewalk, they usually have to grant an easement on their private property for the development of that sidewalk.
To me, if we can make it work like we have in the residential area, that's where we need to
And would
be.
you start
Mayor,
by
I
clarifying
think
the
this may, and the one thing I wanted to address with the mayor really quickly is this was the first time, I did not get an opportunity to see Chris's ordinance, but it's a good ordinance, I think, better than what we have currently for our commercial and industrial and educational. Because the last 4 variances that you just heard would not have come to you because they would have not been required to do that sidewalk. So you would not have seen those 4 variances.
We had 4 and we turned 2 down.
Right. But they would never have even come up because that would not have been a requirement. And catch me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm mistaken. You would not have seen any of those because
Ben, I like
2 of them
that.
was an addition. Yeah,
I hope you do.
Not really, but
Well, I think we need to land
But I
on
like
something
simplicity.
and stop changing it so much because it's
Yeah.
gonna start becoming unfair to the people that have had to do it, and these people don't have to do it. Oh, but now these people have to do it, but this people don't have to do it. And that's what we're doing with
though,
this
Tammy,
stupid
from the
sidewalk
outset, when we passed this and you and I were down, we understood that that it was gonna take years to get this right, and that we were trying
I've
something
read-
and then we were gonna tweak it year after year
I agree.
as we figured out what was gonna work best and what was most functional, and I doubt that there's ever gonna be an ordinance that doesn't end up with variance requests.
Well, I'm sure there won't be, but I think
but
we
that's
need
because
to.
there will always be special circumstances. I mean, I'm a little afraid with my concern with this is that it's not inclusive enough, that the definitions of community centers may not be adequately broad, that people sometimes have to walk a long way to get somewhere in this town. That we got a lot of areas where people just gotta walk, and I wanna make it safe and easy for them. And so how we define those areas, I'd kind of like to think more about, and we clearly are kind of out of time tonight, but I'm open to making something simpler. I like simplicity.
Well, let's, go ahead.
Is there any way we can come together with Chris and do a study session over this?
We can certainly have another study session because what we want to do is, there's more ideas here. And so what I'd like to do, you specifically asked a question at the last meeting about, would you, if you expanded your business at your house, have to, or if you would have to do sidewalks? And I would like to specifically address that before we get out of here, Mayor. I think it'll only take a couple minutes. I think Angela's ready to do it. And yes, we obviously need more input on this, and we will have more. We'll probably have another study session before we bring whatever the final proposed version is to you. So yes, we will have that. And we will have it with staff in an environment like this, so that after we've all weighed in on it. So go ahead.
There's been several different versions of the sidewalk ordinance, and under a previous one, adding an accessory structure in a residential neighborhood also triggered the requirement of a sidewalk. That has been removed. So if you are on a residential property and you are adding an accessory building, you would not be required by ordinance to.
Regardless of the size.
Regardless of the size.
I thought it still had a size limit.
No,
That's what
that
we
was
wanted to
taken out of the
clarify.
last
I
one.
heard someone say it was taken out.
It was.
It's changed so many times, Mr. Wilson's right. So we probably should have started with what do we have now so that we could better understand that. This isn't as simple as what you just saw for the residential, but it's been effective because you haven't seen a residential variance request in a year and a half.
Say that again.
You have not seen a residential variance request in a year and a half. And you all know there's been a lot of houses built and started in the last year and a half. So that tells me we've got it pretty good. We could mess with it some more, but I'm also knowing that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
We know we have issues with the commercial because you see a lot of variances, and that puts all of us in a position where we have to tell them they have to do something that they may not want to do. I think you made a good decision last time.
Sometimes you have to suck it up and do it.
However, what you've seen is there's various ways you can do it. You could also look at industrial zoned areas, taking those out. You've given variances before. Well, actually, you said it's not a requirement in the comp plan. But would you talk about the commercial requirements a little more so we clearly understand what's required now?
Right now, if you are in commercial, industrial, educational, or public, and you are adding square footage, be it addition or a new building, then you are required to do a sidewalk, regardless of the size of the addition or the size of the new building. Period. So that's why you're seeing so many, because we see a lot of new buildings being constructed. We see a lot of additions. Anytime they're in one of those zonings, you need to do a sidewalk. And, people, some just do it, and you don't ever know about those until you see, oh, they did a sidewalk. They must have done something new there. But then we are getting our fair share of variance requests still. And with this particular version that Chris is proposing, I noticed it just addressed commercial, so that will exclude the industrial ones, so that would not be required. And on commercial development, maybe Chris and Carla can give me a number, but last year, maybe 4 or 5 site plan reviews for commercial development, so maybe you would have had 4 or 5 sidewalk requirements, versus we probably permitted, 20 or 30 commercial new buildings and additions. So
clearly, we will be putting in some more thought on the commercial side in particular. And Commissioner Norwood, you're exactly right. We will have another study session on this to discuss, because it would be nice that the next revision we could live with for a while, although it may have to change at some point.
Do you all foresee, like we have the 50/50 program for the residential? I mean, in our discussion, just throwing this out there, possibility of doing the same thing for commercial. You know what I mean? If we want to encourage it.
We have a 50/50 commercial partnership program, but it does not apply to instances where the developer is required to do it, essentially by the ordinance. If they're required to do it, they have to do it, currently. But if they have a good example is downtown. There's a couple locations that I believe are in the 50/50 program this year that engineering's working on. One of them's Bell Jewelers, one of them's the Symphony. And I know we're also going to be working on the Napoli's sidewalk area. That is using that 50/50 partnership commercial program. To be frank with you, Commissioner, we could come up with a program like that and figure out what you might want to fund it with. The challenge is going to be, with the limited resources, where do you want the money to go? And
It's not in the budget this year, is it? Didn't we take it out?
No, it's in there. I believe there's $25,000. Aaron, can you help me? Is it 25 for commercial, 25 for residential?
Last year.
Oh,
And we have applications, I believe, at least for commercial. Do we for residential?
I know one year we took it out.
One for residential. So it is in this year. It might have been,
We
might have been
took it
last
out
year it was
a couple of times. We took it out for a couple of years. I
Bounced
guess-
around.
Yeah.
We
And some years it
need,
does
we
go
need
down.
to shut her down.
We do.
Angie, thank you. Chris, thank you. We will bump item number 6 to the next city council, next study session meeting. We are adjourned. We'll meet upstairs at 6:30.
False alarm ordinance, man.
Thank you for watching the Enid City Commission study session. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition on channel 112. In addition, the study session is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.